to verify their name. So I want to say to Guyanese, all those who asked me when I was in Berbice area, I met with hundreds of people literally, and they were all worried that everyone would have to go to verify their names. Every single Guyanese, they don't have to go. You don't have to go. Only the exercise is only for new registrants if you're not on the voters list. So that was corrected in the order. But one thing was reduced. The 49 days became 42 days. Not 35, the commission, as the commission agreed. So we said, we raised the question, what's going on? This issue was raised at the commission. And you know what happened? The 3 commissioners plus the chair voted to extend it to 42 days, contravening an earlier decision that they had made and accepting the principle that Lowenfield can change decisions of the commission on his own. So a commission can decide and then he makes the change on his discretion, on his own discretion, and then the commission, what happened here, it baptized it. And so this is worrying about the rogue elements in the secretariat. So you would want to think that this was all a benign mistake. But it's not benign by any way whatsoever. And we notice this because they are hoping, when the new program was presented to the commission, they're hoping to settle the NRR by the 13th of December. And they needed to extend the claims and objections to get enough time to process the house-to-house data so they can merge the house-to-house unverified data with those coming out of claims and objection into the new NRR. So they needed the extra week to do that, and that is why Lowenfield adjusted it. It was not benign at all. So this is a big fight for us because we're never going to allow unverified data to go and contaminate the NRR. Remember, the house-to-house was not observed like what you have a claims and objection now. So a new registrant comes in, gets registered, all the scrutineers are there. The scrutineers along with the RO has to visit every home to find out if this person is really a real person before they get it added to the NRR. That happened all the time. In this house-to-house, I'm sure they padded names. So if you just take the names and merge them over without that verification process, you'll have a contamination of the NRR. So even now we have to remain vigilant about the attempts in there to tamper with the voters list. And I want to put them on notice that we are watching everything. We are watching it. We're not going to allow unverified data to contaminate the database that has been had, the verified database. And so that brings me to the international community and the presence. Again, I'm talking to people, and if Mr. Lowenfield is the interlocutor between the international community and the GCOM, we're not going to get very far. The Commission has to do this itself. He misrepresents the offer of help. He delays the offer of help. In fact, the Commission has agreed to bring in international help, but he will frustrate that. And this is why the people who are coming in will not have line responsibility, but they should have oversight responsibility and report directly to the Commission on their findings. And that includes UNDP. I heard Lowenfield does not like UNDP because of that report that they put out when they came in 2018, saying that the house-to-house registration is unnecessary. And they uninvited with Patterson and the 3 commissioners from the PNC, they uninvited UNDP. we must secure the help from all of the international bodies. So we will keep at this. I'm telling you this because I think it's necessary to bring the country up to date with the shenanigans that are going on within GCOP. But we are not unmindful of what they are, and we are not dropping our guards. We're very vigilant because information shows a pattern of behavior. And I want people to understand this even as they go out and protect their rights. And this is for all Guyanese. What I'm saying here is not for PPP supporters. We all have a duty to ensure that we have the cleanest possible elections on March 2nd. And so we will remain vigilant on this issue. The second issue that I wanted to talk about is something that I want to return to that I have spoken about earlier. It is this so-called Cummings-Berg Accord and what they're doing in these negotiations. So I saw AFC's chief negotiator got into trouble in Trinidad and Tobago with some getting caught with weapons. That's not my primary concern about him being caught. My primary concern is about what has happened in the past 4 years, the link between Patterson and Jamaica, and whether monies were siphoned off from the Treasury to pay for these services. And we have some good information about how this happened. The inflation of contracts and to pay for these services. Not necessarily with this person, but with some others. But that is the pattern that we have noticed. And so their entire, I mentioned at that time that whilst this country is looking to find, people are looking to find jobs and get a plot of land on which to build a house, and they want to live in an environment where they're safe. That is, they expect the Minister of National Security to be focused on solving crime. That they're engaged, AFC and APNU, the leadership of the two parties are engaged now in a backroom negotiation as to how to split up the spoils of government, how many seats they will get, how many ministerial positions they will get, how many jobs with perks they will get, etc. That is what they're focused on. Not on a plan to bring jobs to Guyana, not on looking out for interest in, say, the contracts with the oil and gas company. Today I saw in the newspapers, I think it was Kaitro News, about these enormous sum spent in leasing an FPSO and how it's coming through a labyrinthine kind of system where it's being leased by the companies and then it will become part of our obligations for cost oil. And therein lie a ton of problems and lack of transparency, because are we getting value for money that the Guyanese people will have to pay back for? And that runs into billions of US dollars. They're not focused on that. Right now, they're focusing a back room about sharing the spoils of government. And so that in itself is telling. But what is even more important, what is going on in the back room? If we are, I saw Demerara Wave story, and it says this: a key concern for the two parties is whether President Granger will serve out his entire term if he wins the March 2020 elections. So the two parties are concerned whether he can serve out his entire term if he wins. This is a big concern in the room, and they expect us as Guyanese not to be concerned about that. and not to ask those questions. If we ask those questions, they'd say we're disparaging his health, we're disparaging President Granger. But that's a big concern in the negotiating room from both parties. So it should become an issue at the national level. If they're worried about it in the back room, then the country should be worried about it too, about whether he can serve out a term, his full term, if he wins, which is a big stretch, but a tall order. But that is a big concern within the back room, and then about the differences they want 3 more parliamentary seats, consistent with what I said before. APNU wants that in the negotiation. The FC said, well, give us some more perks at the local level. This is the talk. And then Ramjatan himself, that he has been touting himself as the prime ministerial candidate everywhere. He said he is the candidate. The AFC says that. And it's reported that Mr. Granger said that he has not decided on this and he's not sure as yet whether this will happen. So this is all for thinking. People should start thinking about what's going on, what are the kinds of deals they're making in this back room. They made one sweetheart deal on Valentine's Day the last time, and look at the consequences for Ghana. Look at the consequences for Ghana. And they're busy making another sweetheart deal for sharing of perks, etc., and expediency. And I would bet you that even if Ramjatan doesn't become the prime ministerial candidate, the AFC will still hang on to the coalition and find a way to retreat back from their words that there be no coalition if Ramjatan doesn't become the prime ministerial candidate, because they're interested in one thing, the perks of office. No principle, nothing else. That's all they're interested in at this stage. So it should be, people should follow closely what is going on at this level. Then thirdly, a paranoia has taken hold of the government. And this happens to people who are embattled. They feel that everyone, the whole world is against them. So the foreign minister said election calls by other countries was unnecessary. Now, it was unnecessary, that's their view, but for the whole country, this was very necessary, because they were supposed to call the elections by March 21st, 2019, and they're unwilling to set a date until the international pressure, and we stepped up the process. It was wholly necessary to get Granger to comply with the Constitution and to obey the ruling of the CCJ. She said, at the cabinet level, at our caucus level, we have decided that we will obey the rule of law. Imagine at the cabinet level and the caucus, they have decided that they will obey the rule of law. Can you imagine this? That as though they had an option, but with these people, they do have an option. They can decide at cabinet that we will not obey the law. That is the converse of what she's saying. That they've decided at the cabinet and at their caucus, they'll obey the rule of law. This is what we have. And then to go further, to quote her, to show this, to show the level that we've sunk to, of ridicule, the depths of the trenches that we've gone to. So this is what she says. I mean, we have a little problem here and there, but there are no lives being lost and so on. I don't think we need sanctions at this time because we're very peaceful citizens. We're going along our peaceful way. Who's going to market or going to work? Thank God we have maintained the peace. This is in relation to a violation of the Constitution. Thank God for the PPP that we decided long ago that obeying the law is not an option, that is a necessity. The law is there for you to obey, and we decided not to harm people or burn their buildings, and we wage our protests in a peaceful way. That is why the country is like that. And so she says our opposition leader would have been sending out signals, preferring different statements and so on. So what they have heard of first, they may want to react to. And she was talking about relation to Baroness Scotland's statement. That's what she said. But she has to have a very dim view of the intelligence of the Commonwealth Secretariat and of Baroness Scotland, to think that she would only listen to Jack Dale and make a statement like the one she made. Baroness Scotland has an institution behind her, behind what she has done. She has intelligence, she has a whole technical core which would have advised her. And she must have been following the decision in Guyana, or the situation in Guyana. That is why when she said, she didn't say, Jack Dale told me and therefore I'm issuing the statement. She says the president must call elections without further delay. Now she says that. And then she says the Secretary General has taken note of the 18th of June 2019 ruling of the Caribbean Court of Justice and its consequential orders of the 12th of July 2019. The CCJ's ruling was clear that the Guyana Constitution sets out certain requirements for the time of an election after the valid passing of a no confidence motion. The rule of law and constitutional governance are fundamental Commonwealth values to which Guyana has been subscribed. And she goes on. She situates her call on the government to act without delay in the Constitution of Guyana and in the ruling of the CCJ, not what she heard from Jack Dale. But this is what our foreign minister says, but it's paranoia now. They're criticizing the entire diplomatic community. Now I saw Marco Rubio has become enemy number one for APNU. Enemy number one, and I suspect they will say something about Gregory Meeks too, that they're interfering in Guyana's affairs. Well, it's not so. These are universal values. The Constitution doesn't belong to APNU, belongs to the people of this country. And rule of law and democracy are universal conditions. When they're violated, the international community, everyone has a right to protect this. Or if we had not, when you had apartheid in South Africa, if we hadn't spoken up as an international community, apartheid, the South Africans used to say it's their own business. And in many parts of the world, when people transgress the rule of law, they always claim it's domestic affairs. But contrast that with what Granger did in 2014 when he was calling for sanctions on Guyana. We never called for sanctions on Guyana. We don't want to harm our people. We will call for sanctions on individuals, but not on Guyana. And so the paranoia gets extended. So they now want the people from GMSA, the leaders, to go and give a statement about what took place in the meeting there. The police has to do that. And then some guy, an NDC man who took down Granger's picture because he's unconstitutional. His picture shouldn't be up on the wall, frankly speaking, because this president should have held the election since March 21st. Picture shouldn't be up on the wall, but that becomes a police matter now. it becomes a police. This is when a government becomes paranoid. Paranoid. That is it. Is have the police running behind all these little things. You know, even when I was president, they refused to put up the picture, my picture, in some of the places where they control the NDCs and some regions. Refused to do that. And did it bother me? No. I went and worked with the people I know. I had a long-standing thing in Linden. They refused to put it there, but I went there. I sat with the community. I went to Watuka House, met 300 people, went into Victory Valley, Amelia's Ward, Block 22. Everywhere we built a call center. You think we're going to punish people because they don't want to put up a picture of the president? That's nonsense. It's this kind of thing about a name on every bus, David G, and an arch in my honor, or some nonsense that has us here without focusing on people's job. This is what they're all about, show. So he wants his picture up there. In this time too. This is all what we're getting from the government now. Frivolous things, you know, he is offended. Oh, so somebody protested me at a meeting. Now the police have to go. Poor police have to go now and do their dirty work to try to track who protested him. Jill and Nigel Darmlall and whoever there was there. They made too much noise when he was speaking. So the next thing is the floods, because we have had an unusual high tide and thousands of people were affected. I saw this assessment that David Patterson gave. I guess he got it from the CDC, to say 400 households are affected. It's many more. Many more. Take, for example, the stretch in Region 5, that long area that has been totally inundated for people north of the public road. And they have lost everything. Their rice, their cattle, their cash crop, everything. Even their little livestock, chicken and everything. They've lost everything. And the problem is that it's not only what they've lost now, that with the salt water, they will not be able for several crops to go back on the land, because the land has become saline now, and even grass for the animal will not grow in some of those areas. So many of them have loans, they have obligations to the millers, they relied on their little cash crop for their livelihood. They're all now wondering what will happen next in their lives. And that's why we believe that they must get all the help they can, and they must be compensated. And then in other parts of the country too, like in Region 3 particularly, but many other areas that with pockets around the country, along the coast particularly, that have been affected too, like in Region 6 and other parts, that those people have also suffered losses and should get their help. So I thought it was just the high tide. And that is why my statement said, that the government should, extend help through the CDC, etc. Because we don't want these ministers to get involved. The moment Patterson appeared and said they're going to seek money, I'm very fearful. The last person I trust with seeking money to compensate the farmers is Patterson. Give it to the CDC. The CDC, through a bipartisan process or stuff, must do that. But when you want Patterson giving a briefing and saying we'd try to get money now to compensate the farmers, I bet you half of the money that we set aside will now go to the farmers. We don't trust him at all. Still has to answer a lot of questions. But I believe the help should go to the farmers, and not just the farmers, but all people who lost personal effect, as well as their cattle and cash crops and everything else. All those who are affected must get help now. So I thought it was totally benign. And then I spoke with some of the residents. They came to my office, and our presidential candidate was in the area yesterday. And he told me about some of the additional issues that he discovered on the ground. And it seems as though in Region 5, there's a ton of problems associated with the contract and the disturbance of the sea defense structures that was taking place there. So we heard that the bad construction methods undermined the earthen dam and therefore contributed to this. And so we have to look, this could very well be the result of negligence. And the assessment that 400 families were affected, that's not accurate. If you look at those very areas, the salt water moved through the cocos under the river, under the road. There are some cocos going south. And the salt water has gone all the way up into the farmlands at the back. It's affected cultivation deep into those areas. So that whole stretch in Region 5, the affected area, it's a huge threat from Mahaika all the way up. That they need special attention at this point in time. And I want to assure the people, because they came here and they asked us, and they set up a committee there, that we will look out for their interests, and we look out to see that any help that is given is not squandered. Well, you know what I mean. So these are a few things I wanted to talk about. I noticed the PNC is launching its campaign in Linden this weekend, and it's ironic that they will go to Linden to launch their campaign, having neglected the people in Linden for over 4 years. Granger has made fleeting visits to the community. If you ask the community whether they have ever gone there in such large numbers to discuss jobs or housing or any other development project, you will hear the answer is a resounding no. They never came here, we didn't see them, stuff. But now they're taking a whole crowd, using, of course, state assets. I see they're using the buses liberally from the army and from the donated buses, the RG buses and stuff like that, to take people up. This brings me into another issue on elections, which we will turn to. I hope that you, just as an aside, I hope that you would look at some of these international conventions, and I will get more information to the press about this. But now that we've secured elections, look at what the standards are. For example, just the European Commission for Democracy and Law. These are Convention on Standards for Democratic Elections. It has several points, and one point is like equal possibilities for every candidate or every political party to participate in the election campaign, including the access to mass media and means of telecommunications. So you know the abuse of the DPI and the NCN and Chronicle that has taken place. So this will affect the fair part of elections. When you say free and fair, the fair part has to do with these other conventions. Equal access, no abuse of state resources. And so now that the date has been set, we're in an election mode. The behavior of these entities should change. And we will be writing them first of all to test this, to get access. And then we will make we'll take some additional steps to inform the international community about that part, because I'm not expecting that you will have 50-50, because knowing their government and there is some benefit to incumbency, they will have some benefits from the state media. But when you start utilizing $2 billion of state money to campaign through outreaches and to buy your election material using taxpayers' funds, and when you're using state media for your party purposes, this affects the fair part of elections. So we are looking at all these conventions. I'll have someone brief you about these a little bit later. Even this one, which speaks about administrative resources and fair elections. And it defines administrative resources include human, financial, material, and other immaterial resources enjoyed during electoral processes by both elected representatives and representatives of the public sector, deriving from their control over public sector staff, financings, allocation, and access to public facilities. So it also entails resources enjoyed in the form of prestige or public presence that stem from their position as elected. And then it says, misuse of administrative resources undermines fundamental democratic values. So they give a definition what administrative resources are, and the money in the treasury, the personnel in state agencies, and all of these things are part of administrative resources. And in an election period, there can be no abuse of this. So I will come back to this issue a little bit later, and I hope that the media itself will focus on this. In fact, the convention say that in a free society, it is the media that can expose the abuse of resources, because often there is no other way of doing this. So I would urge the media to read up all these conventions. We'll show you some links to them about fair elections, free and fair elections, and we will return to those issues at some point in time. But I do hope when they go to Linden, coming back to the issue, that the people in Linden will give them the appropriate reception, which is, don't waste your time with them. They're here making new promises all around, but nothing will really happen. So I just want to end here. Thanks.
Tim Walking, Christchurch News. Mr. Dragio, in Starboard News' allegations against DPI, since we're on the topic of abuse of state resources, it also said that you were guilty of doing the same thing a few years ago. Do you think that you have the moral high ground on this issue?
So the thing is that we said that and you should know how the ads move. We said we will advertise at the time I was president in the newspapers, or more ads will go to the newspapers that had the highest circulation. At that time it was Kaishore News. And so the paper you worked for was a beneficiary of that. In retrospect, it may be the wrong decision, and I'm saying this today. In retrospect, it may be the wrong decision. And not because Kaishore News became almost like a tabloid at one point in time, but because I think that there should be some way of ensuring that all private media, regardless of where they stand or that they enjoy state assets. So you're right about me saying this, and it coming with, because I've had a history on this matter. But looking forward, I think we must have in the new government an arrangement where all the private media benefit from state assets, and state ads must not be used in a punitive manner. I did not do it in a punitive sense, but notwithstanding that, I think it's wrong. It was wrong.
Okay. The recent events of the past week have brought into question a really huge issue for people living on the coast, the matter of climate change. you've been heavily involved in providing relief for those people, and I know both campaigns have talked about their need to use clean energy. But this issue of climate change is on us right now, and the coast is going to flood more again. How can you provide immediate solutions to the people living on the coast? And what are your thoughts on moving the population to higher ground?
Yes. So clearly climate change will affect several things. Rainfall patterns, the rise in sea level, it would stress traditional infrastructure, and we have to prepare for this. So part of our strategy was which is the low carbon development strategy, was to use resources earned through the sale of forest carbon in our forest to do a number of things. And the first of which was to catalyze green jobs. So you can create prosperity through a different pathway, a greener pathway, catalyzing green jobs, thereby displacing polluting activities. That's one. I don't want to go into all of the details. Two, it was to expand the resilience of our economy by generating new exports, green type exports, education services, research and development using our flora and fauna, etc. That's the second aspect. The third had to do with resilience, climate resilience. So using some of the money for climate resilient infrastructure. So if you look at the your canal now, we started that to strengthen the Conservancy Dam and to do the project that they're implementing now, what we started, to go into to blow some of the water into the Mahaika River. That is better flood control, water management. The Hope Canal was the same thing. Since that Hope Canal was built, we did not have a major flood in the Mahaika-Myconia-Barry area caused by blowing the water into the Mahaika River. I went there several times with Dr. Jagan, etc. And it's walking the ground, seeing people. That is how our approach to development has come about. Not by just sitting in an office and coming up with a plan, but seeing how almost every rainy season, when the dams were threatened, and it threatened the East Coast, the whole East Coast, because if those dams broke, the whole East Coast would be flooded in Georgetown. And they're earthen dams at the back there, for those who haven't been there. The water start overtopping. If you don't release the water into the Mahaika River, we didn't have a choice. And the moment we release it there, it runs right across all the way up to the Barry, right across. There's nothing to block it, flood those areas. We would lose sometimes $20 million in a single year. We spent about $16 million to build the Hope Canal, but that effectively stopped the flooding at the back there because we were looking at control. We had a multi-million-dollar project for mangrove, growing mangrove, working with the European Union, so to repopulate the area with mangrove, to put a frontier. If you look at the tsunamis that took, like Indonesia, etc., the places that had the least damage from the tsunami were areas populated by mangrove. We started doing research so that we looked at it there. We then started looking at the pumps. We bought a ton of new pumps because you need capacity to pump out the water. The problem is that the gravity flow alone, with the turning the tide, if you have a lot of water, it can't take it all out. So we had an entire plan to focus on these areas. We didn't have all of the money, but at least we had a plan. And then we started doing some research into climate resistant crops. So rice that can stay longer in the water without dying, or drought resistant, because climate change is not about flooding alone. You can have long periods of drought. It's a variable weather pattern. So the research would be to introduce varieties that are more can adjust to the extremities of adverse climatic conditions. So all of these things were part of the plan that we are working on. And a few days ago, I met with the Private Sector Commission, and I was speaking about how we intend to expand the parameters of the LCDS, because it was focused to a large extent on the sale of forest carbon and using the resources for these purposes. But we now need to expand that to the sale of climate services, which can earn us more, and then expand the parameters of the LCDS to cover biodiversity and water control. But not just water, floodwaters and irrigation water, but also underground water, because already we're witnessing some saline intrusion. A lot of our wells we extract water for people to drink, potable water from the wells. And if you have saline intrusion, you don't replenish the water table, it would affect us along the coast. So a lot of these things you have to think to the future about. So clearly, you have to look at it. My thing with this government, they just put a document called the Green State Strategy, and no project, no program, etc. It's just like statements of intent, as I said before. Nothing in a real fashion with projects like we had working already on resilience, and also decarbonizing the energy sector. You asked me about. So we'll make a contribution in terms of reduction of carbon by doing a blend on our fuel, and by the hydro and other things that would have reduced our energy or carbon footprint by as much as 94% in the energy sector. And that would have happened there. Green energy, but also greener transport, and then climate resilient stuff. A whole plan we had worked out. They haven't gone with not green energy, not fossil fuel energy. Now we have a ton of blackout. They haven't made new investments. They have done nothing, not on the climate side, nor even the supply of power. There was one aspect that I missed on your thing.
Moving the population to higher ground.
Oh yes, moving the population to higher ground. A lot of our infrastructure and our fertile lands are still here. It's over time that could happen. We can't pick ourselves up now and go. And that is why you need, in Georgetown, you need to focus on better drainage. We need to concrete all of our drains in the future. All these mud drains, when we get some money, oil money and stuff like that, that's what we have to do. We have to build concrete drains in the city so that you can clean the drains quickly, you have better management of water, more pumping capability. Even in the South Georgia, always floods out. You have to raise the level of the road. You have to build concrete drains, small drains across the country. Better pumps in the farming areas, more facility. We need to you can manage water better. Holland did that for centuries. So we can't move our people out. And remember, some of our most fertile lands are along the coast. You can't give up on them and say, all right, let the sea come in and go all the way up to Coverdin. And then, let's give it up. In fact, you may need to reclaim land offshore and to build some resilient things. And you can do that easily. So a lot of countries have done that. So if we plan to build some infrastructure, like 4-lane road going to the highway, that brings you down from the highway into Georgetown in 20 minutes. Because you don't have houses going on to everywhere on the highway. You have feeder roads coming in. That will allow people to go and live up the highway, because then they have good water, school, and they can get into the city in 20 minutes to work. You can drive in. Then they will move up there naturally. But now If it takes you 2-3 hours to get down and you don't have infrastructure, it's unrealistic to expect people to move. So I see the move as a gradual one, people going to higher grounds, but we can't give up our productive assets on the coast. We have to defend them. And we can defend them if we work smart, we find smart solutions.
It's interesting that you mentioned
Yes.
decarbonizing the energy sector. You know, the petroleum industry is a direct and significant contributor to the climate crisis. And so how do you curtail that sector to fit in line with your low carbon
Yes.
strategy?
We're looking at the national footprint. So most of the oil we produce would be used elsewhere in the world. And that is why we still believe that the externalities that they create there, the carbon related and polluting related type of externalities, people must pay for them. So there was an idea with the cap and trade system or a carbon tax to do that. So whilst we're an exporter of oil, because we're not a consumer of all of this oil, our carbon footprint is not going to escalate much. The rest of the world, and they must pay for the externalities. That's how I see it. So
Sean, please talk into them.
yeah, sure.
Sir, you would have refreshed your assessment of the damages that is in Region 5. Would you support the government applications to the contingency fund for the monies? And from your assessment, being more than 400, would you say that the money that they're applying for would be enough for the works and compensation relief?
Sure.
Or should be more money?
I don't know, because people are now calculating their losses. So I am very skeptical of any number that they have just pulled out like that without getting detail. You know, the people themselves submitting like what they lost. So I have some skepticism about the numbers. And I will support the use of the contingency fund for disaster. I will support that, but it must be done in a controlled environment, not these ministers getting their hands on the money. It must be done at a technical level, proper assessment by a technical group of the staff in some of the ministries, technical, not political staff. And they just go and do a proper assessment and get help to people. We will support that. And as to quantum, let the assessments determine that. Let the assessment. So we not fix on a particular figure at this point in time, but we will support it. We will support it. Next thing you know, 800 million and 600 million gone to some contractor.
In 2005, households were given $10,000 during that flood time. What would you recommend as a figure for households, not the farmers who would submit their assessment?
Well, the thing is that it depends on, because most of those people there, they lost livelihood. When we gave the 10,000, it was across the board, right? Across the board, because people, you know, some people lost basic things like just to get them to clean up the place and all of that. That was really what we focus on. So it was widespread, everybody. Here, it's more specific, and it's people lost their livelihoods. So I think the assessments have to follow the loss of livelihood, particularly where there is negligence on the part of the government, because in Region 5, everyone, all the areas, I went into Danzig, Colombia, all these areas, and High Dam, and people were saying it is the contractor. They just dig up the toe of the dam, they dig up the toe of the dam and pile it higher, and the thing just, the wave knock it off. And so where is negligence? The state has to make a substantive contribution. If it's just like routine flooding, etc., that's a different matter, but there is negligence. So I will, once again, I will support the use of money from the contingency fund to help the people affected, but it must be done in a transparent manner. I have great concerns with Patterson and Jordan and the others touching money, any money. I have great concerns, but I will support people getting money. I can't tell you how much now because it should follow the assessments. Yes.
All right, two questions, Ganesh Kote. Do you still have confidence in the chairperson of GCOM in light of the fact that there was a unanimous decision in 35 days and then she went on to support 3 commissioners for something that seemed to have not been discussed by everybody and your commissioners have not agreed on? It seems like the tail is wagging the horse down in GCOM. Do you still have confidence in the chairperson?
Your latter assessment is accurate that the tail is wagging the horse. And even the 35 days, you recall when Gordon Mosley said that Robeson Ben had voted against international presence in GCOM. He misled people. What Robeson Ben had voted against, he as a sole commissioner, was the claims and objections for 35 days. He was arguing it should be a shorter period. And the commission, everyone agreed that it should be 35 days. I found it extremely strange, having made that decision in that with a vote, that a CEO can come and then change the decision of the board without consequences. And it's time that the commission calls in the police on some of these individuals or discipline them. But you know, in that environment, that would be a hard stretch. You know, may never happen because it seems as though he's doing this with the support of some commissioners. And I found it very strange that the chairperson, having supported that 35 days, and that was the decision of the commission, changed to 42 days. I found it very strange.
In light of these strange findings, do you have confidence in the chairperson still? I do. Secondly, U.S. Congressman Marco Rubio, issued a statement recently. Do you think Mercury's lobbying played a role in that?
I don't know. A lot of people, Guyanese, called Rubio's office. Mercury may have spoken to him. I spoke with his staff when I was in Washington.
In light of
there are lots of people who, for me, I don't care because it's not, I don't care too much about how it got to this stage, because I know that many people now, Guyanese from abroad, and here in civil society, there's a growing number of people who are now coming off the fence and who want to play a role because they're offended about the breach of the Constitution and the acts of this government. And so I don't want to claim that it's the PPP efforts alone that led to the statement or to enlighten the congressmen about the situation in Guyana. What I'm happy about is that they now are aware of what's going on in Guyana, they're aware of the transgressions, and they're looking at free and fair elections in Guyana, as all of them have stated. I don't want to claim, oh, it's PPP alone, because many people may have contributed to the congressmen's offices and the senators' offices being briefed about what's going on in Guyana. So it would be very disparaging of their efforts to the others.
Just for a little clarification, it is all well and good that you do not want to rain on the other people, other persons who have made efforts in the fight to seek democracy. Yes. Fairness. But wouldn't it also be prudent of you to know if the $32 million that you're paying Mercury every 3 months. It's paying off. Mercury has to say, well, this is what we have done for 32 minutes for this 3 months. Because it's worth 3 months.
Trust me, after the elections, I'll share my assessment of their effectiveness with you. But I'm satisfied, and it is, so I'm satisfied, and it's not every 3 months. It's not every 3 months. There's been a long period of suspension, then we re-engage, then we go into suspension. We're not a wealthy party. And so we have to manage our resources in a manner that brings the greatest effectiveness. And if you ask me, I said this the last time, I wish we didn't have to do this. I wanted, that money could have been spent elsewhere on doing other things right here in Guyana and among people. But imagine we have to pay a lobbying firm basically to bring to the attention of the international community the transgressions that this government has been engaging, because they present an air of normalcy. So the foreign minister goes to shake the Secretary General's hand and tell everything is good in Guyana, you must trust Granger. He's a wonderful president, we believe in elections, etc. Their ambassador runs over to the OAS and said, we're complying with the rule of law and the Constitution, and the opposition is unreasonable. That's their message to these bodies, and they can go there 100 times a day because they're already based in Washington, paid for by the taxpayers of this country. They've been in a campaign, waging a campaign of misinformation abroad, claiming that they're in full compliance of the Constitution. So we had to present another narrative, the facts, because trust me, and you know the reality of these places. Their focus is not necessarily on Guyana. It might be in Venezuela, or the Middle East or somewhere else. So you have to, and when they see a report from the diplomatic missions, everything is going well. Not our diplomatic missions here, but the government's diplomatic mission, because I believe that is help. I also believe the reports from the local diplomatic missions have helped us tremendously, because they've been in the forefront of issuing statements too, and in favor not of the PPP, but in constitutional rule and democracy. So no doubt their statements would have helped to get the senators and the congressmen to move to. So we are not claiming victory. We're glad that there's international attention on Guyana for free and fair elections. We're glad about this. But we're not claiming victory, and we're not saying we're the only ones that work to bring international attention to the transgressions of the government, on the transgressions of the government. Many, many people have done this.
I'm being a little suggestive here, and you could answer if you wish.
Sure.
You are suggesting, and we all know lobbying takes different forms. You are suggesting Mercury presents the facts to congressmen, and we are well aware that Mercury was embroiled in a number of investigations suggesting they were misleading at times in the last US election.
Well, I checked that, and that story came, and I addressed it here too. There was one person in Mercury who was linked to that, but Mercury is a huge company. Mercury is a huge company, and we looked at the credentials of the company, and they're very effective, and they have they're still operating in the US. Nobody has been sanctioned or anything like that. They have not been sanctioned. So we checked that out too. We checked the credentials carefully. Anything else? There's one issue that I see in the public domain, and this is this question of this the Clive Thomas about cash transfer. And let me just say to you, because in the course of the week a ton of people keep calling about what is the PPP's position on cash transfer. because from time to time I have pointed out about the misleading narrative going from the government to individuals about cash transfers. So we have heard, I was writing Sophia one evening, and people said, we were told by some of the activists from APNU that we will get money from the oil sector. Every person will get some money when oil comes in. And then we saw Clive Thomas suggesting that you should do this to every household, not to every individual, but households. And he suggested with the implication that it could be done almost immediately. And we had to look at the numbers, what he was suggesting should happen, and point out that it's unrealistic, that it will cost us what he suggested, the $5,000 US per household will cost us in excess of $1 billion US per year, and we were only going to collect maximum or so $300 million per year for the first 4 years, every year. So you can't distribute per year $1.1 billion if you're collecting only 300 million. That's three times more than 3 times the amount. I saw them pushing it again, the WPA, but this time they did it with a caveat. So he argued that yes, we should have a trash transfer, but this must only happen. We should take 10% of revenue, and it would only work when we are producing 1.5 million barrels per day. I pointed out that we are not going to get to 1.5 million barrels per day until after 2030. So this narrative about this will change people's lives from tomorrow next year is a false one. And they're only misleading people once again for political reasons. Because when the technical work, if you read what he said, technical work is done, it's only upwards of 1.5 million. So this is what has been going on so far. We've been just pointing out about these issues. So from a theoretical perspective, now some countries have been exploring this concept of a universal basic income. That is, every person in the country must get a cash grant from the Treasury, and that this will help with employment, it brings dignity to people, and it will eliminate poverty and probably reduce crime, etc. So of recent, this idea has taken hold, and there have been some experiments in different parts of the world, in Finland, etc. The results on unemployment has not been great. It didn't show any major shift in employment after the cash grant in some countries. So the results at best, let me don't be ungenerous to the results. So the results have been mixed about universal cash, basic income. Now, Alaska does this, and a lot of people have been saying, but Alaska does this. So Alaska gives people a check every year. You get a check for a sum of money from the fund that they have, because they produce oil. Now, the thing about the Alaskan model is that the sum is variable. So that if oil prices are high in some years, you might get a bit more, and then it could get down as low as $700 a year or so if the oil prices are low. So it's variable. It adjusts it upward and down. they did a study about employment in other states and Alaska. No major difference. No major difference. So that is how it works in Alaska. But there's one thing about the Alaska that people don't factor in, is that the Alaska is a state in the United States of America, and their currency is the US dollar. So they can spend as much US dollars as they wish without it having the effect of the Dutch disease, and so the biggest concern from developing countries is the change in relative prices. Because if you spend too much US dollars in the economy, the local currency appreciates and it kills off the productive sectors. And so that macroeconomic impact that a scheme of that sort will have in, say, a smaller country, the US or Alaska doesn't have to bear. So you have to think about that carefully. Brazil did some of this. And in Brazil's case, they said, I think it's Bolsa Familiar, that they call it that. They said poor families will get a check from the government. But only poor families, not everyone. But the obligation that you have after receipt of the checks is that the children must attend school. Because a lot of, in the north of Brazil here, in these areas close to us, a lot of the kids were not attending school. So it was conditional upon the children attending school. Here in Guyana, without oil money coming, we start to introduce a more targeted approach. That is where, when we said that the $10,000 for the school kids must go to kids and will grow every year up to a maximum of $50,000 per child per year. And that was even without oil money. That was a form of transfer from the treasury to the children. So at this stage, I am not going to say that the PPP will not consider cash transfer. I'm not saying that. The PPP has to keep its mind open to any method that would reduce poverty, get more jobs to people, get our children to school and getting the best quality education and healthcare. And in fact, in our manifesto, we're going to be talking about conditional transfer, targeted transfers to vulnerable group right at the beginning. So we have to help single parents. We have to help children. We have to help the older people first. And as our capacity grows and we get more money, we constantly have to see that it's sustainable though. We have to constantly see that whatever we do don't cause us to be worse off than before. And so we will keep an open mind to cash transfers to Guyanese. We'll keep an open mind, and we'll have to look at it carefully and go through all the technical issues to see that you have enough money to actually do this and that it's sustainable in the long term. That it doesn't lead to the Dutch disease, it doesn't lead to killing of work ethic and all of these issues. So we will keep an open mind at this stage to it. So I just wanted to say that. And by the way, I saw that Tolo says it's constructing a local shore base by next year. I hope they don't give them the production license before the elections, because I gather there is move afoot to do that. That means the PPP will not be able to renegotiate this and some other contracts. And so we are watching this carefully. Thank you. Thank you.